On today's podcast, we have Everett Carney. He has spanned the tech scene through New York City, coming from Seattle, and now in LA. He does a lot in gaming and with blockchain, and some of it is really on the bleeding edge. Welcome, Everett.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here.
Welcome, Everett.
Yeah, good to know a little bit about what you're working on right now, Everett.
So right now, I have been working on exiting one of my previous companies, which was primarily focused on data collection and analysis, and I'm moving back into the gaming space with a focus on sort of bridging the gap or finding new ways to apply blockchain technology and a little bit of AI to the mobile gaming space, and then eventually, hopefully, getting into console, more traditional gaming.
So, what is different about, and you're a gamer yourself, I presume, but what is different about how blockchain is enabling you to deliver an experience to the players?
So the blockchain provides us with essentially an immutable record. The obvious use case for that is inventory systems, things that are called NFTs or non-fungible tokens, which are basically in-game items, and or they're represented as in-game items, I should say. There's this notion in the blockchain and gaming community that the blockchain will eventually enable us to create a Ready Player One style game, where you see all kinds of different items and different characters, and you have avatars, and everyone's their own custom, whatever they want to be, which is technically possible. It's entirely possible, and I believe that eventually we'll get there. But that's sort of jumping the gun, and there's a lot of really cool things that we can do up until that point.
And what are those things? And what's been your reception so far from both other technologists in the gaming community, blockchain stakeholders, as well as the players themselves? How are people receiving your mutation of this experience?
So it's been incredibly positive. It's been a little bit difficult to explain to people who aren't sort of in this space. And one of the things that I've been practicing and we've been practicing as we're out actually pitching and fundraising is how do you explain a fairly new concept to people? And this new concept is actually the ability to democratize the game modification and development process through what's called staking, and essentially enabling a governance model for a games community, so they could vote on updates and actually help steer and drive the games that they enjoy playing, rather than being at the complete behest of the developers themselves.
Maybe this is a good chance, Everett, Don here, to move into the generated items, because I found that fascinating. I've been learning a little bit about games and mobile games through a team I've been helping in Seattle that came out of King, and they're launching their own studio. So that seems like a vast opportunity for improving player experience, as well as generating opportunities for new revenue streams for the game designer or the publisher themselves.
Yes, absolutely. So one of the big concepts today in gaming, you have like Diablo 3 and No Man's Sky, and you see what's called procedurally generated content. And what that means is that the the game developers created a system that can sort of automatically build a dungeon or a planet or some things on a planet, and they basically supply a set of rules to this generative engine, and it creates new content for the players to go explore. And it's a way to extend the longevity of a game and add replay value. One of the things that artificial intelligence offers us are the generative adversarial networks. And these GANs are very, very cool, cutting edge technology that's still, they're still very much coming into their own. Right now, they're primarily used for the deep fakes videos and a lot of language analysis, actually. As we move forward, one of the things, Don, that you and I had talked about was basically using a generative adversarial network as a backing mechanism for a crafting engine in a game, essentially giving players the ability to forge their own items or to build their gear and kind of tell this network what they're doing. So it's like, oh yeah, this is a house, and these are my building materials, and I've got some wood and some concrete. and you sort of paint by number, and you draw a rough outline, and then you click a go button, and that go button sends the data over to the generative network, and then comes back with a fully rendered model that you have that's custom and proprietary to you. And it sort of, it paints it and it makes it nicer, and it creates a model or an image that feels like it should be in the game.
And then that seems like that could turn the player into a merchant on the platform, and then the game developers could be a part of that in facilitating those exchanges.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I do try to steer away from is the notion of gaming for income. I think that, especially in the blockchain space, we see a lot of this mentality of, oh well, if people can earn money doing something, then they'll do it, and that's not true. We've seen decades of people just having fun, whether it's in a video game or going for a walk, or you go to the gym, you pay to go to the gym, but people will like to do things because they enjoy them, not necessarily because they can profit from it. Now that might contribute. It might be nice. Maybe you're a painter and you sell your paintings on the side, or you have an Etsy shop. Those are all great, awesome things that people do, but they're not necessarily pure hobbies. And the monetization aspect for just an individual player should be, in my opinion, a bonus of next generation systems, not the reason for someone to play. I don't want to like strap people into a digital world and force them to play all Ready Player One. They should voluntarily be there because they're just having a good time.
Yeah, so Everett, you are yourself speaking a bit about your own life too. I met you through Timothy Lewis and the blockchain community in Venice Beach, and he says I have one of the most brilliant people you're going to meet tonight, and sure enough, you are, and that's a compliment. But how do you balance this passion for what you're doing and the expectation of career and making it work and the business side of it?
So one of the things that I think that we will see just in general over the next decade or two is a shift in perceived value. And one of the things that both artificial intelligence and blockchain and gaming offer us is the ability to very quickly and effectively adapt to a shift in perceived value, um, as we move forward as a society and as a group of people. So right now, value is dollars. We live in America, and we value the U.S. dollar. It's also the world's reserve currency, I believe. But it's paper money, right? Someone somewhere says this is worth $1, therefore it's $1. If I have $1 and you have $1, we have the same dollar, and we can spend that dollar in the same way. That's fungibility. And if we shift from the perceived value of dollars back to more of a bartering system, or we start to value skill sets and art and other things as artificial intelligence grows and automation grows, even more so than artificial intelligence. Because remember, we don't need to make smart machines, we need to make effective machines. Those machines need to be able to consistently perform a task in order to quote, take a job from a person. The machine doesn't need to think. And so there's kind of a misnomer and a misattribution of artificial intelligence as a threat. What's really a concern going forward is automation. And automation tools are skyrocketing. They're growing rapidly, and the effectiveness of robotics is growing rapidly. So, we will see a bunch of people who now have time. And one of the things that I always talk about with Timothy and people in that group is really the issue of an abundance of time rather than the issue of lack of jobs. People will shift, and that shift, I believe, will trigger that change in perceived value. And I believe it's going to go more towards a barter system, which then goes back to gaming. And it's like, hey, if I've got this cool thing in a game that a bunch of people are playing, or in sort of a universe that a bunch of people are participating in, that then holds intrinsic value because you can do something with it, and you can trade it, and you own it.
That's fascinating. That's extremely fascinating. And where can it go wrong? I always bring up on this podcast the man versus machine, machine versus man, and machine analogy. But where would it go wrong? Where do you get a little nervous when people are talking about topics like this, or is it just? Are you sure that everything is? And I don't want to introduce people being nervous, of course, because I'm actually a big fan of AI, obviously, and I think it's generally useful. And I love your point about automation. But let's just talk about the dark side briefly. Where can it go too
Oh
far?
man, it can go all kinds of directions, and I think about this a lot. One of the reasons that I got back into gaming is just again to reiterate, my concern, I guess, is what people do with an abundance of time. We've seen in history that that's not always been good. You look at like everything from socialist countries to the fall of Rome to a lot of other places where if you've got people that are just kind of sitting around, people do like to do things. They don't want to necessarily go to a 9 to 5. That's boring. But people like to be active. They feel fulfilled when they're kind of contributing back to their community. And one of the things I think that we've lost and a positive opportunity of this potential future is sort of rekindling that neighborhoodness and that community, that like kind of local community aspect of life that we've given up in exchange for a Facebook community or a digital community. And not to say that digital communities are bad, because I like those too. But the dark side of all of this is people have too much free time and then they spend it in negative ways and like vindictive ways, or they instead of going off and creating new things and doing new things, which I do believe people will do, they might feel shortchanged and sort of defensive might be a good word, but nervous and uncertain, and therefore less open to other people and new opportunity.
When I hear about people talking about AI and coming automation, the metaphor or the epoch most people compared to is the dawn of industrialization, or even kind of the whole period of bourgeoisie that saw impressionism come out as an art genre and all that.
Yeah.
This is the first time I've heard a mention of fall of Rome.
I love the fall of Rome. It's important. It's an important lesson.
Yeah, well, fell more than once, and then you've also participated in quite a few of these communities throughout the country, New York and even back in Seattle, and it sounds like Don and you have that Seattle connection as well. Can you speak a little bit about the communities and tech in particular, and how you feel that they're evolving, and if you feel like they're being pushing things forward, or what does it feel like to be really deep in the tech communities in these different places?
Yeah. So my very harsh criticism of each tech community, we'll go with that, because I have super strong opinions about all of them. Seattle is skittish in terms of investing and attempting new products, trying out new businesses. They've got a lot of Microsoft money, a lot of Amazon money, of course, and there's major companies, big value being generated there, but they like their consistent, stable incomes, and they don't want to necessarily risk their capital. That's a positive for San Francisco and LA to a degree, where you get more of a let's just go for it kind of attitude, which I do think is good. But then San Francisco is also a bit of a circle jerk, and it's a really heavy emphasis on eyeballs and data, which isn't a bad thing, but there's so much more than that, and people are once you move beyond something like that, once you move beyond something that's the whole debt trade and debt funding concept. Look at Uber; they've done nothing and they're burning billions. And don't get me wrong, I love Uber, but where does a company like that go? Sure, automated cars, yeah, great, but we're still a long ways off from that. And I think people have this idealistic vision that, oh no, we can just flip a switch and all of a sudden in 2 years we'll have a bazillion automated cars. It's like, well, people, regulators, all kinds of roadblocks prevent that kind of realization. So, LA, you get a lot of people who want to show off like they've got a lot, and they really don't. So you have to be cautious of that here. But then there's massive opportunity in entertainment, music, advertising. We have all kinds of really powerful agencies and things here. So if you're into that world, this is a great opportunity for you. And New York, of course, fintech. And New York, I've actually found is a fair balance between the San Francisco, LA, and Seattle mentalities. In New York, you have a lot of money, of course, and you have a group of people who are willing to risk it and try something new and interesting. And you have sort of your traditional money that will come in after after you've got some revenue and after you've shown more like an A round rather than a seed or an angel round.
For Seattle, I have my theory on why the angel investing community is so hesitant. I'd be interested in going a little deeper with you on that.
Sure.
My theory is it's really where most of the wealth has been generated by folks who were employees of, say, Microsoft early on. Even early on investors, right, who believed in Microsoft as a local company and invested, did really well, like just never work again well.
Oh yeah.
So it's very different from how people made their money in San Francisco. And I think there's a lot of capital, but the angels just don't know even how to choose an investment. And they depend on a very small set of gatekeepers to make those kind of decisions. And unless those gatekeepers jump into a deal, the money's not coming.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. You have like companies like Madrona Ventures and other people who want to be thought leaders and who are active in the space. There's some funding for student projects and cool things like that. And I really want to encourage that. I think we need as much of that as possible. Um, One of the things I talk about as an alternative to UBI is this notion that wealthy people should be able to just give their money to small businesses, small medium businesses, students, research, all kinds of things as a direct tax write-off. And I know that there are ways to do that, but I think it needs to be incentivized further because that will create all kinds of new opportunity. And going forward, I think that's a super important, option to provide people. The benefits of that could be tons and tons of job creation, whole new paradigms, all kinds of cool things. But it would alleviate, that kind of hesitancy. So it's like, okay, cool. Well, even if, as someone who's made, say, call it like $3 to $5 million, so they're doing well. They're not set for life in a high end area necessarily, but they're very, very, very happy. If they do a $25,000 angel investment, $50,000 angel investment, and it completely goes up in smoke, they at least get a really nice benefit from doing that, through a new kind of program. That's something I would really like to see.
So maybe this is a proposal for Jay Inslee. Institute a income tax on the extremely wealthy, but they get dollar for dollar tax credits for any angel investing.
No tax. It should just be a program. No tax. It should just be a program. People will do that.
Yeah.
If they can mitigate their tax, their tax dollars, and it would be great to see it on a federal level, because at that point you could take money from Seattle, San Francisco, wherever, and move it to like Alabama or Kentucky or these other places where you don't have these tech hubs, and maybe we could start to generate them. Wyoming is a great example of someone of an area where a bunch of people are migrating because of their favorable blockchain regulation. That's a brilliant move on their part to bring very intelligent, probably fairly wealthy individuals into their state and into their space.
This is the first time I'm hearing about this. What's the number? What's the population that's moving because of this blockchain legislation?
I don't have numbers on that, but they've done a lot. Wyoming is like they're doing the whole blockchain frontier thing. Maybe we could look that up and attach it to the podcast after, but they are trying to lead the charge in terms of favorable blockchain regulation, and it's being received very well by the people who are aware of it.
Gotcha.
I saw on your Twitter feed at one point you posted a article or a cover from Forbes magazine stating, Nokia 1 billion customers. Can anyone catch the cell phone king? Not necessarily just particular to games and AI, but Everett, what is your feeling of where things are going? Where do you see yourself in 5 years from now, as from a technology perspective, and what's going to change?
True. I think we're going to be in a really crazy world 5 years from now for a lot of reasons. Some of them political, most of them uh, tech fear on behalf of governments more than people. Because the more people are able to, be self-sovereign, um, the worse, fundamentally, the worse that is for governments. And even in relatively free areas, I would say, we're fairly free here. We've got lots of personal freedom. Canada, tons of personal freedom. Many parts of Europe, tons of personal freedom. Again, I tend to be a little more libertarian, and don't like all the taxes and stuff, but I understand that they're important and necessary as well. Um, the countries like the U.S., if someone can circumvent, specifically tax, but maybe other regulation and things, to kind of go outside of the box, that's a threat to to those governments. People start to not need government, and the notion is that, oh, you need a government to keep you safe and protected. It's like, well, maybe we don't anymore, or maybe that need is lessening. I think it will be around for a while, but maybe one day down the road, it's something that's handled privately.
Should there be governance around AI and blockchain,
Um,
or is it
no,
self-governing?
I think there's, this is something I go back and forth on in my head. I think there should be. Um, Deep fakes are a genuine concern, or the notion of deep fakes, which again are just generative networks that are trained to mimic something. And, um, with all the good that can come from AI and blockchain, there's a lot of bad. Money laundering is bad. Funding of like extreme groups, no matter who or what they are, is bad. Uh, and that's always a concern, and some regulation around that is important, because people do need to feel safe and they do need to be protected, as much as I might be an advocate for personal freedom. It's not everyone's necessarily capable, and not everyone necessarily wants to take care of themselves, and not in a bad way, but just maybe they don't want to have to deal with that, and that's perfectly acceptable. Um, so yeah, there needs to be regulation, but it needs to be not knee jerk, and it needs to be done by people who really know what things are. I'm not I'm not a fan of politicians creating regulation. This is a big, rift between me and political world, just on a personal level, because you get a lot of people who are trying to regulate something they don't understand, and then they misregulate, and then you have all these people who are suffering, who are really trying to make something positive, and because someone was afraid, they overregulated, and now you're losing jobs. You're taking away jobs from people. You're taking away opportunity from potentially the world, and that's bad. So it needs to be done
Yeah.
cautiously, and it needs to there really need to not be heavy-handed retroactive laws. Those are a massive threat. I was on the phone with someone yesterday talking about how he had to move a little startup side company that he was building to the Cayman Islands at a fairly major expense, for him, because no other blockchain companies would work with him, on fear that the SEC would retroactively apply some arbitrary law that they come up with down the road, and that everyone that interacted with that company would get slapped for it. And that can't happen. That's a problem.
So, tech, I
Wow.
mean, even before we talk about AI and blockchain, and even when you're talking about just database software and real prosaic stuff that's kind of old news now, there's always been a challenge where the legislators that make the laws and then the judges that may adjudicate a lawsuit or a dispute over something related to tech just don't have any basis in it. Are there folks that you identify who are in positions of authority to create regulation who have a fluency in blockchain or AI?
Yeah, Elon Musk is a controversial character, but he does, he's fairly well read, and maybe I don't agree with everything he says, but but he should be advising. I know Teal is interested in advising on political side of things. You've got Anthony Pompliano, who is very well known in the Bitcoin space. Brock Pierce, all these guys, Tim Draper. a lot of these guys are VC-esque or investing on the investing side now, so they're not necessarily the actual technologists, but they're very, very intelligent people. They're very well read. They know what's going on, and those are the kind of people who can really accurately help with regulation. And politicians at the same time need to meet people halfway. They need to understand that they're not going to understand what's going on because that's frankly not their job. And they need, their job is to listen to people who know what's going on so that they can construct the laws and the regulation around, a very, very rapidly changing world.
Well, Everett, so we're getting close to our 26.1 minutes, and we want to be able to fit this into an average commute time to someone. So I wanted to see if you had any final kind of remarks, if you have anything you would like to tell our 500,000 listeners, kind of at the end of the podcast.
Don't be afraid of AI. Don't be afraid of new technology. Read and explore. There's so many cool off-the-shelf things that you can it doesn't take a lot of effort to actually download a chunk of code and run it. Maybe a couple hours of reading, and you might be able to do that. Play with the NVIDIA Gaugan, Gaugan. It's really cool. You get to kind of paint by numbers, and it'll generate a scene for you, which is a great hands-on experiment that they're doing. Just keep an open mind with everything you do, and to get a little political, if people are arguing on Facebook, step out of it. It's not worth your time. Go read something. Go do something positive. Ignore the echo chambers. You're only seeing things that one of the negative sides of AI is Facebook sort of scopes your view to people they think will keep you on their website longer. So keep that in mind when you're watching information flow in front of you.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining us on AI Podcast. You can reach us at ai-podcast.com or find us on Spotify or iTunes. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.